Happy to welcome Dr. Simon Reid, who actually contacted us who wanted to speak at this event. So it's great to have you here, and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Yes, as Matt says, I'm Simon Reid. I work for Cardiff University as a social researcher. Over the past few years, I've been researching dementia and glaucoma and how those two conditions can contribute to an overall decline in health. This decline, referred to in our study as the precipice of care, is defined as where multiple conditions interact with one another to make their management more difficult. So, we may have talked about some of this before, so apologies if I'm repeating what other people have said, but in a UK context, there are comparable levels of prevalence between dementia and glaucoma, around 850,000 people with some form of dementia, compared to 600 to 900,000 with glaucoma. Both conditions are chronic and long-term, with glaucoma, if untreated, progressing to sight loss and blindness. With an ageing population, both of these conditions are also expected to increase in prevalence over the coming years and also demonstrate increasing overlaps. The population experiencing both conditions isn't fully mapped out at a national level, though a study in Scotland suggested that around a quarter of people now blind through glaucoma also had some form of dementia as well. Dementia has a variety of symptoms, but for our research, the focus has been primarily on memory loss and how this influences a patient's ability to self-medicate their glaucoma eye drops, which remain the predominant first-line treatment for the condition. Oh, I seem to have skipped ahead of myself a little bit here. So, what's our research problem? Oh, no, I've gone back again. It's just doing it all by itself. Okay, this is where I want to be. So, what was our research problem? Well, in the 2003 World Health Organization report on long-term therapies, it emphasized concerns over patients taking their medication as prescribed. The Social Care Institute for Excellence in the UK estimated that while 45% of medicines prescribed are for older people, about half of that population are non-adherent or not taking their medication as you would expect. So studies of this non-adherence have recently emphasized qualitative approaches to shed light on its underlying causes. However, few studies have done this in relation to dementia and glaucoma. And we address that research gap by exploring how such groups manage the two conditions, their concerns when doing so, and the factors that aided or impeded adherence. Okay, let's try and move on gradually. Okay, there we go. To examine this, we adopted a qualitative grounded theory approach based on requirements to study people's experiences and identify an underlying process, and in this case that was medication management for those with dementia and glaucoma. The study incorporated 2 glaucoma clinics based in Scotland and Wales, where we conducted lengthy semi-structured interviews with 23 patients suffering from both conditions. Aside from that, we interviewed 22 lay carers as well as 9 healthcare professionals as well. Also, we later expanded the study to also incorporate those diagnosed only with glaucoma and those who had glaucoma alongside another non-dementia comorbidity, giving us a total of 66 participants. Also, 17 of those with dementia and glaucoma were also interviewed a second time after around 6 months to see if there had been any changes in their circumstances. So what did we find? So when we were analysing our data, we found thematic links to the work of a theorist called Pandora Pound. Some of the categories of adherence behaviour suggested by Pound were active and passive acceptance of medication, as well as rejection and modification of it. We also noted the importance of transitions between these states of adherence and the factors that may impact on that. And those included the role of the carer, the relative importance of health conditions, attitudes towards medication in the healthcare system, and the importance of pre-established routines, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. For now, though, I'd like to talk through some of those categories of adherence and non-adherence. Active acceptors are described as purposeful adherers. They're heavily engaged with their prescriptions and fastidiously following them. A prerequisite of this is the belief that the prescription itself is necessary, effective, and safe. This was often intertwined with some level of knowledge or education about glaucoma and its potential consequences. The active acceptance was demonstrated by several participants within the sample, And the quote on the slide here exemplifies such an attitude. It was from an elderly lady who reported a corroborated ongoing adherence. Your eyesight is very precious. I'd rather go deaf than lose my eyesight, so no, I put the drops in. Indeed, that preciousness of sight was mentioned by several participants falling into this category. On the other hand, passive acceptance was either indifferently adhering to medication or relinquishing control to others in order to remain adherent. The first quote here is from a carer being interviewed after her mother had moved into a care home, with the carer now responsible for instilling her drops after her memory issues became too difficult to manage. She was very much in control of it until in the last 2 years, her understanding of things became less, and then to remember to do things became more difficult. The second quote is from an elderly lay carer who had taken over his wife's eye drops after she encountered very similar issues of memory loss. She wouldn't remember, even when I go through and she's decided to go to bed, I'll say I'll come and do her drops. If I didn't say that, they wouldn't be done. Now, dementia clearly plays a role here, but several patients appeared to relinquish control regardless of any memory loss. An elderly male patient stated that he managed his eye drops by his wife saying, "Come here, you've got to put your head back," and then having her drop them in for him, with this ongoing long prior to any dementia. Accounts of rejection or resistance were less common than active or passive acceptance. Nevertheless, we uncovered some instances. Again, these were often tied to beliefs about glaucoma and the condition itself, with some participants appearing not to take it all that seriously. The quotation here demonstrates this in the case of an elderly couple who were self-reporting inconsistent adherence. So the husband said, "She does it when she thinks about it. When you remember, you do it, don't you?" And the elderly lady with dementia said, "I'm a bit naughty." And the man says, "Because it isn't giving her any trouble, she isn't bothered with it, you know." And the asymptomatic nature of glaucoma, I think, plays a part here, with not particularly giving the woman any cause for concern and thus being deprioritized on that basis. So modification of regimens or prescriptions suggests a level of active engagement from patients, with medicine being taken but not necessarily as prescribed. In the context of dementia, some healthcare professionals expressed their openness towards this so as to aid patients who had other functioning routines embedded in their daily lives. An optometrist we interviewed said, "I've got some patients who just can't remember to do things in the morning, or vice versa. If you were just to say, well, do it all together rather than being fixed, I think that would make life a lot easier." Interestingly, we saw one case where a clinician chose to change a dementia patient's routine, which resulted in patchier adherence. The patient's carer stated that while there was some consistency in taking the drops at night, as it was in the first case, a move to the morning saw this disrupted. This shift was intended to maximize the effectiveness of the eye drop, but ultimately led to greater forgetfulness and confusion, suggesting a better compromise may be required. So these categories of adherence and non-adherence offer a functioning snapshot of a patient's status at any given point in time, but the factors influencing transitions between them are less transparent in Pound's model. We were interested in how dementia affected such transitions, while also examining factors relevant to those with or without memory loss. The most common shift reported was from a state of active to passive acceptance. That said, numerous carers described long spells of self-managed active acceptance that ran counter to that predicted pathway. These were shown to be associated with the categories or factors mentioned previously, attitudes towards medication, importance of conditions, pre-established routines, and the role of the carer, which we'll talk through now. So a key factor in the active acceptance of glaucoma drops was an underlying belief in their value and, relatedly, some level of patient education as well. This was associated with an understanding that glaucoma could lead to blindness. For some participants, as we quoted earlier on, this was driven by their attitudes towards their sight, believing it to be precious. For others, though, it appeared driven more by a deference to the healthcare system itself, as shown by this quote from an elderly man quite content to do precisely what his doctors told him. I asked him, "Is it the fear of what would happen if you didn't take your medicine that keeps you adherent?" And he replied, "No, it's just that they say, take this." And that's all he said on the matter. Okay, and the relative importance of conditions then. So most of our participants had conditions other than glaucoma and dementia, with arthritis and cardiac issues being particularly common. For some, adherence to glaucoma drops was deprioritized amidst this. The first quote here is from the elderly husband of a woman with dementia, glaucoma, and arthritis as well. For this couple, the drops were deemed less important than medication for conditions that were causing her pain or for her dementia. I don't give her eyes a thought, actually, because they aren't that important. No, it's more like other things take priority over them at the moment. Again, the asymptomatic nature of glaucoma appeared to impact upon the importance attributed to eye drops when considered against other medications, and more so if the care burden was relatively heavy. Interestingly, though, this theme was also noted in interviews with non-dementia participants. For example, a cardiac and glaucoma patient said, "You can pop off quickly with the heart, and you don't pop off quickly with glaucoma." Many patients and carers expressed a strong belief in the importance of an established routine for taking eye drops. The quote on this slide is a good example of this and is taken from a daughter who had been caring for her mother. And this lady's mother had a lifelong history of fastidiousness and taking medication, including encouraging her own daughter to do so. She would really do it to the letter and would always take them. She used to say, "I have to take them the last thing of the day," so she'd have them by the side of her bed. She would put them in, and apparently the consultant had told her that she should put them in and she should hold her fingers in her eyes for 60 seconds, and she just literally did it to the letter. So following the diagnosis of dementia, the patient was still able to maintain these routines for several years independently, including the guidance to hold her fingers in her eyes, which isn't that common, as far as I'm aware, until this ultimately trailed off. Memory aids such as pharmacy packs marked with days and times have often seemed to extend independent active self-medication, but eye drops don't fit into that packaging or that system, meaning that the importance of a pre-established routine for them was all the more pivotal. This could include leaving the drops in plain sight, the use of signs or notes, and integrating them into other daily rituals such as meals or brushing one's teeth. Finally then, the role of the carer, which is a very important theme which kept re-emerging in different ways. It was important in noticing shifts in adherence behaviour. The lay carer was often more attuned to these shifts in behaviour that could take place through memory loss and dementia. Beyond that, though, lay carers also assisted their proxies with medication. This could be as a substitute for memory, reminding patients to self-instill. Alternatively, the carer could take over the duties altogether or delegate them to another carer. So the quote here is from the wife of a patient who was particularly keen on maintaining her husband's independence for as long as possible, as this was true to their very socially active life prior to dementia. She said, "Yeah, he does it himself. I've got to tell him before we go to bed. I say, don't forget your eye drops in the fridge. So some nights I go downstairs and he comes down. I say, have you done it? Oh no, he says. He's got to go back and do them. But that's all. I'm sure if I weren't here, he wouldn't do them. And again, I wonder if it's because he's got used to me saying about it, but I don't know." She ultimately made the choice to remind him to take his drops rather than instill them for him on that basis, allowing a form of assisted active acceptance to manifest itself. So, aggregating the interviews from our cohort saw a general consensus that dementia did eventually reduce a person's capability to manage their own eye drops. Memory aids, however, offered hope for a lengthier time of active acceptance. One suggestion to carry forward would be to have small stickers to apply to the pharmacy packs that are often used, indicating that the eye drop should be taken around the same time as other medications, or single-use drops that could be included within such packaging may be appropriate. With regard to the glaucoma clinics where the research was carried out, it was felt that better recording of dementia diagnoses would help staff to tailor their prescriptions and their advice. We are looking at the potential to try and embed a more visible record of dementia status into the iClinics database and potentially expand this to other clinics as well. Another recommendation stemming from this would be to enhance the use of the iClinic liaison officer, who is a conduit generally for support organisations. As it stands, they are used only for those patients who are registered blind in our research anyway, but should a patient have dementia and glaucoma, they could potentially benefit from a more proactive support to prevent further progression. And this is already happening to some degree, I believe, but removing that variability in practice, I think, would most definitely help. Okay, and that's my contact details there. I'd like to thank the International Glaucoma Association for funding the study and the rest of the research team and all the participants as well for their valuable input. Here's my contact details, and I think after another talk, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Very interesting discussion. Thank you. Since we've now got optometrists and opticians and neurologists working together, is it possible that we could work on a common language or a common way of talking, shall we say? Because obviously the three disciplines may or may not, may be using the same things but calling them differently. I think going forward it would be useful to have the same terminology. That's something you've already thought about or not.
I can start on that, which is one of the reasons why VisionUK has a Dementia and Sight Loss Committee, is exactly that. So we have within it Royal College of Ophthalmologists, College of Optometrists, and various other people in order to do exactly that. Because I think one of the issues we've always found is that there are these silos of working. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because certain things need to be done within a specific space, Pamela Lab as a for instance. But I think the general working and the general terminology has to be done through with everybody, absolutely. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. But no, you're absolutely right, yes, that common language is a key thing. Because otherwise we do lose people in the mix, unfortunately, as we've discussed the various different terms of PCA along the way. So, yeah, absolutely right. Just a quick comment, Simon. Just say thank you for making our ECLO representative smile with giving us a mention. It's always good. Yeah. A quick one with glaucoma. Do you find that over a certain amount of time that actually by the nature of dementia, people just stop taking any kind of medication, not just glaucoma medication? Is that one of the things? Because obviously it's a wider thing. Most people older people with glaucoma and dementia generally have more than just glaucoma and dementia.
That's right,
So,
yes.
yeah.
That's the ultimate pathway that you're expecting people to do. So, yeah, anything that I was saying in my speech was around the issue of delaying that progression. And so ultimately I think that's the end point for lots of people. I think that's when things tail off. Without assistance, that is. Obviously, you have assistance, then you can exist in the realm of passive acceptance of medication for a very prolonged period. But I think it's that phase of active acceptance that tends to diminish much more quickly with the progression of dementia, yeah. And it's true for all medication, not just glaucoma.